Alright, so this is going to be the first video of the channel that isn't an awkward introduction. This is going to be my own opinion based again, because I have no actual facts to back any of this up, but this is my opinion based rankings of each one of the ADCs coming into the world scene. I know we don't have the third seed from EU yet, but I want to do it anyways because I don't usually have this much free time, and we've got every other ADC besides that. So for the most part, I want to obviously, if you don't know all the ADCs going into Worlds, yeah. By the way, I'm not doing Taiwan. I'm not doing any of the wild cards because I don't have enough time to watch all those regions. I'm sure if you want somebody who is more knowledgeable about that stuff, there's somebody out there. But I am gonna focus mostly on the main regions, excluding Taiwan because I don't watch them. So that's pretty much it. China obviously has Jackeylove, Uzi, and LWX going in. EU has Perkz, Rekkles, and an unknown ADC. That's going to be going through the gauntlet right now, which I'm going to be honest, I'm going to hope it's Upset and Schalke going in, because that would make this list a lot more exciting, but for the most part, we don't have any idea who's going to go in there, so I can't really put a ranking on them. And then NA, we have Sneaky, DoubleLift, and Codysun, and then LCK, we have Teddy, Nuclear, and Viper. So I'm going to lead off. I think I'm going to go bottom to top. Worst ADCs in the league for me to the best. I'm going to start off. There's only 11 right now, so at number 11, I'm going to put Sneaky. Obviously, I don't think anybody can disagree with that right now. I think Sneaky, for the most part, has had an extremely off split. After, I would say, one of his most dominating splits. In the spring split, I think that was his most dominating split he's had since his introduction into the league. But this split, I don't know what happened this split. I don't think there was no changes in the rosters. There's no changes in the lane specifically for him. The meta didn't shift that drastically, so I don't understand what happened. I mean, maybe the lack of as much Ezreal prevalent in the meta is what happened. I think that might have been a big thing because he really did look the best on Ezreal in terms of just most of the ADCs from NA, but he's struggled extremely hard this split, and I think that's going to be a big problem for him coming into Worlds. His laning phase was weak before, but now his laning phase is extremely weak, and his post-laning phase in terms of team fighting and all that is just not up to par with most of the international stars in the league. I think that I don't see him being anything but a liability in this meta, and on top of the fact this is a meta that is, I would say, for the most part, is really reliant on your ADC being a strong player. I wouldn't say as much as most seasons, but again, this is definitely a season that's reliant on the ADCs for the most part, so I don't have too much high hopes going on at Cloud9 this split, or this Worlds, but they can always surprise, and I don't think this is the best Sneaky's has to provide. We've seen a lot better from him recently at that, so I'm going to put Sneaky at the bottom. I don't think there's going to be a lot of people not agreeing with that, but at number 10, we're going to go with Clutch Gaming's Codysun. I know a lot of people are kind of high on him right now because his stats do look pretty decent, actually. And I think that is something that I agree with. For the most part, I think in terms of team fighting, he's one of the better ADCs in the league. But he has, even in my opinion, worse than Sneaky's, has the single worst laning phase out of all ADCs going into the World season. You can look at it relevant inside of any of their games against Team Liquid. You can look at it again against anything, honestly. If you saw the Sona Taric lane Team Liquid put against Clutch Gaming, that completely was up in CS somehow, or even equal, is ridiculous. That is the single worst 80 laning duo bot in the entire game. There's not a single worst lane you could play into the bot lane and hope. You could hope for, honestly. There's nothing worse than a Sonataric lane because you have a melee support that's reliant on mana and cooldowns that he can't protect himself with E as a disengaged tool because he usually has to keep it. He usually has to keep it to kind of keep the waves at bay for the most part. And if he doesn't, I guess he could push off the ADC, but it doesn't really help that much. The sustain in lane is pretty decent with Sona on target. For the most part, you cannot do anything. You don't have really poke inside of the lane phase, Sona does have some, but it's not nearly as much as ADCs provide. Tarek himself is pretty decent early game in terms of dueling power if it's not a ranged support, but he can't do anything when he's in the position where he has to consistently maintain the wave and try and keep the Aether. And on top of the fact he has to use his W and Q, which have a pretty decent mana cost and cooldown. He has to use those things to keep both of them afloat in the lane. For the most part, we saw them somehow lose in the laning phase to that against Team Liquid, and I do think Team Liquid is the better laning phase team, but there's no excuse for that. They shouldn't lose to anybody playing that comp, but they somehow did in the laning phase. So the most part, I think Codysun, if he gets past the laning phase, is in a pretty solid ADC, but his lack of ability to lane is going to be too much of a detriment for him to be able to be competent. I think the big problem, I do think Clutch Gaming's surprise factor and their hyper aggression is going to be a good thing for them, but Codysun is going to be a liability to their playstyle, even though he's definitely drastically improved them from last split with replacing Piglet. I do think he is going to be he's going to be a big liability because he cannot compete in the laning phase with a lot of these high tier ADCs, and hopefully he doesn't get placed in any of them. They could have an easy group. Again, Codysun is not the worst ADC on this list, and I don't think he really should be that far towards the bottom, but I think that specifically in this meta and against these ADCs, his really terrible laning phase is going to be too much of a problem for them to be able to use him properly. And then number 9, we have Damwon Gaming's Nuclear. I think that he's pretty decently better than his EU days. I don't think that is really much, honestly, because he was terrible those days, but he is not the worst. I mean, again, I think that he has a lot of positives going for this team. I don't think he loses as much as you thought he would going into the season. He's never been the priority pick for the team. Again, you saw him in the series where they beat Longzhu going to get into Worlds in the Gauntlet. He was not prioritized again. He lost everything. He was the worst ADC completely, but he played his role. He was able to play the team fights properly, and most of the carry potential for Damwon doesn't come from the bot lane regardless. It comes from Naguri in the top lane, the jungle. You don't really have too much. There's not too much pressure on Nuclear to overperform, and that's why I think that even though I don't think he's an incredibly good ADC, I think that I don't rate him that low, at the very lowest, because again, his playstyle is not a detriment to his team. They can survive with the playstyle that he provides for the team. On top of the fact, again, his team fighting is adequate. I think it's pretty decent, and his laning phase is also adequate. He will lose against most of the top tier ADCs, but he won't lose as hard as the bottom 2 players that I just mentioned. Nuclear has a lot of potential. I think that he is going to be one of the better well, not a lot of potential. I think he has a lot of upsides. Potential is a stretch. He has a lot of upsides that I think that Codysun does not. Codysun's one upside, again, is his extremely good team fighting skills. But Nuclear, again, I think that he's more cohesive with his team. I think that his playstyle, it really does seem like he's more coordinated than Codysun is. Where Codysun is the better team fighter, I think that Nuclear really does fit the mesh of the team a lot better. And there's not much to say about Nuclear. He's not a standout player. He's just not bad. And then number 8, I'm gonna have Perkz. I think that Perkz is not a great ADC. I think that when he plays an ADC champion, I don't think he's bad, but he's not up to the par of the rest of these ADCs on this list for the most part. But his flexibility in terms of just ability to go other things besides ADCs is what puts him above some of these characters. I think that his ability to play mages, his ability to rotate in lane, like when we saw a few times with the Fnatic versus Fnatic versus Rogue? Was it Fnatic versus Rogue? Yeah, when they swapped Woolite to the top lane and all that stuff, that's something that happens pretty decently often in EU, but it's something that I think that Perkz's ability to play these other types of champions, it gives the G2 the flexibility to be able to do in other ways. Like, again, we could see Perkz go into the mid lane sporadically. Perkz is, again, I think that in terms of ADCs itself, in terms of standard ADC, he's not that good. I don't think he's a great ADC. I don't think he's a bad one. I don't think he's a top tier, and I think that he is the weakest player on this entire G2 roster, which is really not that bad to say since it's an incredibly good roster. But he is definitely the weakest link on this roster, maybe. I think Wonder is definitely giving him a run for his money right now, but for the most part, Perkz's flexibility is still something that you have to give him credit for. I think that is something that really does mesh well with G2's hyper aggressive and kind of out there play, like different play style. They don't always play the standard meta. I don't know if that's going to happen in Worlds. They were able to do that in EU because they're so good, but we'll see how that stacks up in Worlds. But I think that Perkz is gonna show up at. I really do think Perkz has something to prove at this Worlds to prove that he's not one of the weaker links, and I could easily see, with his talent, he could easily master the ADC role by the time we get to Worlds or next season at the very least. But that's pretty much it for Perkz. And number 7, I have Viper. Viper from Griffin. I think that Viper is one of the most underrated ADCs because I think a lot of people like to centralize around Chovy in the mid lane, who won the what's it called? Won the stupid MVP last split, or they like to focus on man, I'm forgetting his name right now. Tarzan in the jungle. Like, there's a lot of these people like to focus on these two high profile names, but I think that there's a lot that Viper does for this team. Him and Lehans specifically. There's a lot that they do for this team that goes under the radar. I still think they are probably the weakest portion of their team, specifically because I do think that, what is his name? What is that dude's name? He just got picked up. What was it? I'm trying to, hold up. I don't remember names. I should have memorized this. There we go. Doran. I think Doran is really fitting the meld of this team really well. His abilities on carries is substantially better than swords, which is something that I think is going to really fit this playstyle of this team and help them accelerate their game style, like playstyle, a lot more. But Lehans and Viper are not bad players. I think they're really underestimated for the most part because they don't have these standout performances that Doran the hyper carry has. If you saw in the SKT series during the beginning, like during the first series he played against them in the regular split, I think that you saw a lot of Doran's fans come from there because he had a lot of flashy plays. If you see, like, again, Tarzan has been one of the best junglers in the world for the past 2 splits, and that's something a lot of people give him a lot of credit for. And Chovy won MVP last split with an incredibly good KDA, but again, Lehans' ability, like, again, he's a really good standard ADC. I mean, you don't really get too many of those. I think that he's a better version of Codysun, and where his laning phase isn't specifically good, but I do think it's substantially better, and his team fighting's is probably one of the better portions. I think his late game ability in the team fights is pretty decent, but the problem with that is that Griffin is not a late game ADC. I mean, late game team. They cannot function in the late game, and that's going to be something that I don't think is going to really suit the world stage. I don't think a lot of teams are going to try and stall out, but if they can't take over the game, because there's going to be a lot of teams trying to take over this early game, and Griffin, if they don't take over the early game, they do fall apart. They don't know how to slow the tide of somebody pushing their lead, and they don't know how to do any of that. I think the one person who is suited for that is Viper, because his team fighting is pretty tremendous, and his laning phase isn't bad, so which I guess it's not like he's a bad early game ADC, but for the most part, his team fighting is pretty tremendous. So that's going to be something that could really just accelerate their. That could really stop them from just getting overwhelmed in the later parts of the stage. But again, they're not going to pick for the later parts of the game, so his impact on the game is going to be pretty minimal. You won't see a lot happening from Viper. He is a good ADC. And again, he might be one of the key components in some of the wins, but for the most part, if you want to look at somebody who's going to be who's going to make the most impact on the team, again, it's going to be Doran and Chovy. Doran and Tarzans are going to be the two big names that you're going to have to look out for. And Viper, although, again, Viper's not at the bottom, obviously. I think he's a better ADC than a lot of the people on this list, but I think that his lack of actual, like, substantial impact on the playstyle of his team is going to be what separates him from the top of the pack, because he really just doesn't have that. He doesn't fit the mesh of like his team style very well, but he's really synergized with his team. I think that's something you have to give him credit for. And at number 6, I think that's pretty much it for him. But at number 6, I have Rekkles. I think Rekkles is coming into this Worlds probably going to be the best EU ADC we're going to see. I think that it's going to be between him and Upset for me. I think if Upset comes again, I think if anybody else comes, I don't think there's too much. Even if Patrick comes, who I think is a pretty solid ADC, I don't think anybody else is going to be competing with Rekkles for that title right now, because, again, I do think that ADC, sadly, is one of the weakest roles that EU is sending this year. I think they have a really massive amount of solid ADCs, as in Upset, we got Han Sama, all of those players that are just staying behind and not going to Worlds this split. Maybe. Because, like, it's extremely sad situation. They have a lot of solid ADCs, but they're all on most of the weaker teams. So I think that Rekkles he's picked it up drastically from the beginning of the year. I think he was one of the worst ADCs coming into the beginning of the split until the crit changes from when crit ADCs came back in the meta from in comparison to on hit. I think that's something that shifted him back into the meta, because I think that Rekkles does actually struggle a little bit with what I would say is, these on-hit ADCs. I don't think he was very good on them. I didn't like his Kai'Sa. I think his Kai'Sa's not bad, but I think he's better when it's not reliant on the on-hit, like the forced Rage Blade into whatever that item was first. Whatever. I forgot what it was, but again, I think that's something that Rekkles didn't really thrive on top of the fact that Rekkles the entire team was just falling apart at the beginning of the split, but they picked it up drastically. And I think that Rekkles coming into this season is going to be one of the best. Well, into this Worlds is going to be one of the better ADCs in the league. I think that, again, he's in the top half for me. I don't think and I honestly think he could stand from anywhere from like 4 all the way to 7. I think that that is really his range that he's able to do. And I don't think that he's not a stagnant, and this is more so a generalized position where I think he's going to be in the region, in the Worlds, but for the most part, Rekkles has a lot of talent. He's been one of the best ADCs in the West for probably like 5 seasons straight now. So I think that there's a lot of underestimating I could be doing on him for the most part. Rekkles' ability to play the standard meta, his ability to play pretty much anything, play through any meta. He's succeeded from the Ardent meta all the way into whatever Season 8 was for ADCs. I'm pretty excited to see what Fnatic in general has to show, because I think their closeness in all of the G2 series that they played is something that I was surprised a bit. I don't think G2 was prepared for the stylistic choice they picked in both of those series, but I think that Rekkles is going to be the big surprise factor in the Fnatic series. He's been gradually, I think that, again, Bwipo is the best performing player on the team, in my opinion. It's either between Bwipo and Broxa are the 2 best performing players in the team right now. But I think that it's either going to be, I think the ones that, if they want a chance to make like a splash on the stage, it has to be Rekkles to step it up. Because I think that, again, Nemesis is playing really well. I think he was probably in the top 3 mid laners for the league. In the EU this split, but that is not enough. Again, I think they need that that secondary carry besides Nemesis in terms of just not, like, again, Bwipo's probably going to be playing tanks this for Worlds. I think they need that secondary carry out of Rekkles to be able to take it out of groups, because depending on the group, they could get out easily. For the most part, they need that secondary carry out of Rekkles if they want to have a chance to compete with some, like if they get packed against IG, who's the 3rd seed this split. If they want a chance against that, they're going to have to hope that he can step up what he's been providing recently, because it's not been too impressive. It's not, well, it's been impressive, but it's not been to his standards, I would say. I think his standards are substantially higher than what he's provided for us this split. But again, I still think Rekkles was a top 5 ADC in EU this split. I don't think he was, again, I don't think he's better than Upset still. I still think, in my opinion, Upset is the best ADC in the league. As much as I don't want to, like, as much as people might not agree with that, I think that, again, I think that Keijo is one of the best junglers, so I guess it's not relying on team performance then. But for the most part, I think that we're gonna see a lot. We have a lot of. I have a lot of hope riding on Rekkles, and I do think that Fnatic is gonna do well at Worlds, but it's really relying on him. So again, I think that's pretty much it for him. And my number 5 is gonna be LWX from FunPlus Phoenix. I don't think I'm too. Again, I still think he's an incredibly good ADC, but at the same time, I think that again, he's the centralized. The choice of playstyle is centralized around LWX in FunPlus. I think that if they want to win, they need to get LWX going. But at the same time, I think that a lot of the reasons for his leads come from this playstyle of the team itself. I need some water, man. That's this. The playstyle, the choice of playstyle of the team itself is a rotating jungle and mid, rotating around the map and usually centralize. They really usually just focus their attention around the bot side of the map. I think that is a big reason to their. That's a big reason for their success in with him for the most part. I think that LWX is a solid ADC though. I think that you have to be a good ADC, even if they are focusing you. You have to be a good ADC to know what to do with that lead, and that's something that he obviously knows how to do since they won China this split. LWX, again, I don't think his laning phase is incredibly good. I think that it's been kind of handicapped with the amount of attention he's drawn to his lane. And at the same time, I think that a lot of his stats do kind of get brought up with all of that. Like, brought up from what I would say is what I believe he deserves. I don't think he is one of the top ADCs in China. I still think there's a lot of better ADCs than him. But at the same time, I think that he's an extremely good team fighting ADC. He's really he's extremely synergized with this. Like, I think that is something that I've said about 3 or 4 ADCs, but that is something that is just the focal point of the FunPlus Phoenix roster. Is they don't have a lot of they have a lot of flash. They, like, what's his name? Doinby always plays Yasuo, but for the most part, they don't have a lot of talented talented players itself. I don't think Doinby is the best laning player in the world. I don't think a lot of their talent comes from mechanics, though I do think they have a ton of it. I think a lot of it comes from them being the single most synergized team. I would say one of the single most synergized team in the world. I think there's not a competition for them. Their shot calling is substantially better than the rest of them too in terms of their early game map rotations. I think that's something they like to take advantage of. I think that's going to succeed a lot in this meta. For the most part, I think that LWX himself, even though he is the centralized point, even though he is the centralized point of focus on this team and he is the big hyper carry that gets the team going, I don't think that he is by himself that incredibly good. I think, again, he's number 5 for me in World, but that is not something. I think that in terms of just the results, if you look at the results itself and look at the numbers he provides, I think you wouldn't guess that. I think you would probably guess he's in the top 3, which is arguable. I don't think that. I think that's definitely arguable. But for the most part, I don't think that is possible. Number 4, again, probably the most controversial thing is I'm gonna put number 4 at DoubleLift. I think, again, you can't say it's NA bias since I put both Codysun and Sneaky at the bottom. I think that DoubleLift has had a tremendously good year. Again, centralized focus of the centralized. I'm using that a lot, but the focus of the Team Liquid roster is getting the bot lane started. They are supposed to be what starts this team going. Like, starts most of the. movement around the map. I think that, again, I don't think that they are the best players on this team. I think that Core JJ is himself, and I think that Impact is probably the most important player on this team as it stands right now. But for the most part, I think that DoubleLift is, in terms of just what he provides for his team, I think out of all the ADCs, besides maybe a few others that I haven't named yet, he's probably the most important player for his team specifically. Because even with Core JJ getting him all the leads, even with Core JJ making all the all of the engages and all that stuff, and probably leading the lane for the most part, I think that DoubleLift's early game aggression in the laning phase has improved every single year since his Season 5 TSM days. Season 6 for the most part. I think that ever since those days, I would say that I would honestly say that ever since he joined TSM for the first time, that he's improved drastically every single year until this year. I think that he's looked solid recently, and I think that a lot of his previous mistakes at Worlds, and I honestly would not blame him at all for last Worlds, and especially not the MSI. I think that's two things you can't give him too much slack for. I think he's improved drastically since the beginning of his career, and again, I think that a lot of it comes down to his attitude also improving. It seems like he has a better understanding of where he should stand with his teammates for the most part. But DoubleLift is the most important player on this team, even though Core JJ is the most aggressive. He's the one that starts all the stuff up, and so is Impact. I think that DoubleLift's impacts on the team just they're forced into a situation where he's such a good laner himself, him and Core JJ. They have to play around his early game aggression in the bot lane, and then they have to transition it into a comp that relies mostly around the ADC dealing the sustained damage to keep them going. DoubleLift is probably, again, I think this is going to be his most successful year yet. I think this is going to be because I think that if they had turned it on like they did in the second week last Worlds, I think that if they had played the way they did in the second week, in the first week of Worlds, they would have made it out of groups. They wouldn't have beat any of EU's teams or probably any of the Chinese teams besides EDG. I think they are the better team than EDG last year. But I think they could have made it out last year, and I think this is the year, honestly, that Team Liquid, barring an extremely hard group, besides that, I think this is the year they make it out of groups, and I really do have a lot of hope for that. Yeah, I mean, DoubleLift is going to be the X factor, though. If he doesn't perform, no matter how well everybody plays, they are not going to make it out of groups. So I do think this is the redemption year for him. Number 3, I'm going to have Teddy from SKT. Teddy, I would say, I don't think this is Teddy's worst year he's ever had. Again, I think that when he was on Jin Air, I think that he was funneled all of the resources on the team. On top of the fact that there was not really anything he had to play for besides his own self during then, so he could make himself look better by dominating the lane and stuff, and then transitioning that into a really good team fight that was obviously looked like it was kind of bashing the heads against the wall, like the rest of the team. It looked like that's what they were doing, but he himself was keeping it together. With this new SKT lineup, I think that his old playstyle doesn't work out too well because he's not going to get all the resources. He's not going to get most of the jungle attention, though I do think he gets a pretty okay amount. But he's not going to get all of that stuff because there's just too many carries on the team this time. But again, I still think he's an extremely solid ADC that really did struggle on the early parts of the year with Mata. But now with Expect in the lineup, he's played substantially better. I think he's going to... I don't know. I think that he has a chance to compete with the top 2 ADCs, and I do think, mechanically he can. But mechanically he can't. But for the most... I do think that it's all going to be reliant on the team play for the most part. And I do think that's something that SKT does have against a lot of the upper Chinese teams. I think that they really do have better synergy in terms of just map play, but they don't have that early game aggression that the rest of the Chinese teams have. So we're gonna see if they can stave off the early game aggression that a lot of these Chinese junglers are gonna throw at SKT. I do think that Teddy is the better team fighter than most every ADC in the world. I think there's only one that can really compete with him, but I'm not gonna say man. Teddy. Teddy's laning phase is probably third best at the tournament, just where I ranked him to. The top two are in the top. The better laners are also the top two players, so I think that's something that I would say is an important factor in this upcoming season. Again, Teddy's team fighting abilities. Again, there's really nothing you could say about it. I think that he's reliant. He's not as reliant on his team to team fight well, because we've seen that with Jenner. I think that he has the ability to be a good team fighter regardless of the players around him, which is a good thing when you have a bad team, but it's not incredibly good when you have a good team, because again, it seems like more so he's centralized around. You know what? I wouldn't say that's a bad thing. I think it's something that he's kind of melded into his playstyle, not being forced to rely on his team, and it's really helped like elevate his team fighting abilities into the next phase. I think that Teddy is, without a doubt, one of the best ADCs we've seen for the past 3 years. I think he's been one of the best in the world for the past 3 years, but we really haven't got a chance to see that until this year. And coming into this year, I don't think it's as impressive as I expected. I did really expect him to be number one, but it's really not that big a deal. I think that coming into this Worlds, he could surprise a lot of people, because when players like get put into these big high profile tournaments, a lot of them like to play to the best of their abilities, and we can see that from Teddy. Teddy, at the best of ability, is without a doubt in contention for the best ADC in the world. So I think that it is really a possibility, but he hasn't shown it throughout the entire season for me to say that he could be the best ADC at this tournament. It's a very big possibility. Number 2, we're going to have Invictus Gaming's and Jackeylove. This one is kind of a stretch. I'm not a stretch. It's kind of a surprise for the most people, for most part. Besides if you've watched China. Jackeylove is the sole reason as to why Invictus Gaming is succeeding right now. I think that the Shy is too inconsistent right now. Rookie just sucks. I don't know why he's even back. The new jungler they picked up, what's his name, is just not experienced enough or ready for the world stage or even the professional stage. He's not a bad player, but he's just not up. He's not there yet. I think that he has potential though. Belong has been playing really well though. I think that this bot lane has been the single reason as to why Invictus Gaming is even staying. They even made it to Worlds this year. So I think that a lot of people have to give credit to Jackeylove, because at last Worlds, I think that the bot lane, both of them were the worst players on the team, and they were not. They got carried to this, not carried, but yeah, I would say it was partially carried to a world champion their success. So I think this could be if they could make it this year, if they could win this year, I think that this really just disproves everybody who says they got carried last year, because they are the big carries this year. Jackeylove and Balong are going to be the reasons as whether or not whether or not this team is able to succeed on the world stage. I don't think they are going to. I really don't think they have what it takes anymore. Like, if we've seen the recent performances out of both Rookie and the Shy, I don't think they're going to play that well on the world stage, but who knows if they can bounce back in time. Yeah, I mean, Jackeylove, again, the second best laning ADC in the world. I think that it's just without a doubt, he has the mechanics to keep up with anybody in the world. There's not anybody in the world who can mechanically beat him out significantly. But we're going to have to see a significant step up from the rest of his team. No matter how well he plays, if the Shy is inconsistent as usual, and Rookie just plays as he's been playing recently, they're not going to make it. Like, they could honestly just not make it out of groups if it's a hard enough group. They're just playing that poorly. And that's pretty much it. I think that's pretty much it for Jackeylove. And the last ADC, I think everybody's going to choose the same thing, is Rookie. Uzi. He's been playing out of his mind recently. He's been the single. I think that with Lang getting put in the top lane, I think that is elevated RNG into, my opinion, the favorites to win Worlds this season. I think they are the best looking team going into Worlds, even though they did lose to FPX. Uzi has Uzi has not degraded his playstyle in the past 4 seasons. I think he's been playing at the same level each season, which is something that some people might disagree with, but I think that it's something, his consistency as the top ADC in the world is just impressive in my opinion. Uzi, like again, Uzi, I think that the only competition he has mechanically is Jackeylove, but even Jackeylove gets like some like barrier in his mind when he plays against Uzi, so there's not really, in my opinion, gonna be a problem with these two. I think like there's Teddy has the ability to compete mechanically, but no one else on this list can even slightly compete with him. Uzi is the most dominating ADC probably we've ever seen in this world, like in the world. I don't think anybody's ever been as dominant at his position in ADC position as he has. Carried his team since, honestly, even the old Royal team, whatever their name is, I forgot. It's been a long time, but he's carried his team since those days to a competitive world spot since he's came into the league, and I think that's something that I think he's gonna. I think this is the year that he honestly should win it. I think this is the year that I think this is the first time that I say they're the favorites, and I could easily see them if they do win. If they do win, he is the centralized point of this team. He is the best player on this team. He's the best player in his position. I think that it should cement him as the best ADC of all time. I think there's not really competition for it. I mean, a lot of the ADCs, if we're talking about Wei Xiao, just didn't play long enough. So I think that this winning a Worlds this year will cement him as the best ADC of all time. And even getting to the finals should cement him still. He should already be cemented. I don't think there's really much competition. And that's pretty much it. I think that Uzi's constant ability to stay at the top of his game is something that we really do have to say is something we can look forward to at the very least every Worlds, is Uzi's extremely fun to watch mechanical play. That's pretty much it. I don't think there is much else I have to say about these ADCs. This is really, again, I haven't watched every game of the season. I won't deny that. I watch when I have the free time. I do work a substantial amount, and I play a lot of WoW. So that is something that I play a lot of WoW in League. Those are the two things I do in my free time. I think that this is from my perceived perspective. This is something that I think is going to happen at Worlds. I think that all of the ADCs that I listed are going to be kind of it's going to be significant. I think it's going to be kind of like, what is it called? Kind of related to how well they'll do at Worlds, because I do think that ADC is a really significant role in this split this season. Do you have any disagreements? Leave them in the comments. I don't really see how you can disagree with it. I mean, how you can get too upset about opinions, but this is my opinion. Again, top ADCs in the world right now. I think a lot of these are irrefutable, but some of them, like the Perkz ranking and maybe the LWX ranking, are gonna upset a couple people. So, again, leave your opinions in the comments. I actually like talking about this stuff. So, if you have any opinions, what you think that I should have changed, just let me know. And that's pretty much it. See you later.